summer feeling. Put your hands up for the summer dreaming. Hands up for the summer feeling. Put your hands up for the summer dreaming. Hands up for the summer feeling. Put your hands up for the summer dreaming. Turn back the tide, ignite the feeling. Rewind your mind, summer dreaming. Two hearts collide in the evening. You make me feel alive. That's what I'm feeling. Whoa, whoa,
Clerk, call us to order.
Mayor Hartke,
Here.
Vice Mayor Lopez,
Here.
Councilmember Stewart,
Here.
Councilmember McClymonds,
Here.
Councilmember Wong,
Yeah.
Councilmember Rowe,
Here.
Councilmember Orlando.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Council, as you recall, a few weeks ago, last month, the city manager had presented some information that we had requested related to the CARES Act and opportunities within the city of Chandler to spend that. We had a presentation at that time, and we had given recommendations and follow-up procedures, and today represents what's next with that. So at this point, I'd like to turn this over to city manager.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Mayor's exactly correct. Back on June 11th, we did present to you a very high-level, broad discussion on the AZ CARES dollars that the city did receive, and some thoughts around where those monies could be spent in several buckets. You all did provide us with a lot of recommendations and discussion, and we appreciate that. And so we've gone back, we've addressed that. And so today we're going to do a little bit of a roundabout. I've got several directors going to present to you from their various areas, including Micah, Leah, Sandeep, and Dawn. So we're going to start with Micah to talk about the business plan. So if we can get the presentation up on the screen. All right. So as council will recall, we did receive a little over $29.9 million. There is a difference, as we discussed back in June, in regards to the federal funding that was received by those cities greater than 500,000 in population versus what monies we did receive from the state, which came to us via a different mechanism and therefore are part of our general fund.
Councilmember Orlando. No? Okay. Proceed, I'm sorry.
Okay. Um, the staff has been working with law to take a hard look at what we might could do, especially in the business realm of being able to expend some of these dollars into the community that would best benefit our citizens. And so with that and pending the approval of a grant item we'll talk about at the end that's on your agenda for this week, we'll let Micah go ahead and get started with the business assistance programs that we're going to provide.
Councilmember Orlando.
Do we have a copy of this presentation?
It was
Wasn't in our packet.
part of the packet last week.
The economic development one. The only thing I got community support starts out with mine. Updated, I guess. Okay,
I apologize.
Proceed.
They were ready. They were supposed to have been in the packets for all of you last week.
thank you, Mayor.
Good evening. So we're back before you, talking again about CARES and how those funds have the opportunity to flow through and assist Chandler-based businesses. At our last meeting, we told you we were going to go out, work with our business community to understand what their needs are. So we did a business survey. It went out to the businesses registered here within Chandler. We had 550 surveys submitted back to us. Not surprising, 98% of all the businesses who responded had fewer than 100 employees, which is almost consistent with what we see citywide. About 95% of all of our businesses citywide have less than 100 employees. So very consistent there. Nearly all anticipate staying in business. We only had 2 businesses provide feedback that they are anticipating closing. So that was some really positive news. 70% have seen revenues decline due to COVID, but that other 30% we have seen some growth in a very, very unique area. So we're very excited to see that some businesses are still doing well. But the general feedback was pretty consistent across every survey in terms of what their needs were. And it was split up between rent, mortgage, utilities, PPE were the high level ones. The things that really surprised staff most was the fact that a lot of businesses hadn't invested in providing telework opportunities or infrastructure investments to their businesses. So we were expecting to see more of a need for that, but we really didn't get it. So what we have to you today is to talk about how we as a community, City of Chandler, can help our businesses with the Arizona CARES dollars that was made available to us. So a little bit of background. We talked a little bit about City of Mesa and City of Phoenix being the first cities in metropolitan Phoenix to receive the federal funding. So Mesa received $90 million in federal funding, set aside 20. However, once they got into the administration of their program, they realized they're not going to need all $20 million to be used. So they dialed that money back and started appropriating it elsewhere in their business assistance program. So with their small business grant program, they've awarded $4.8 million to date. And again, because they were using the federal dollars, they could only use it for rent, mortgage, and utilities. We're lucky enough not to have those restraints put upon us because it is general fund dollars. So we can be more flexible, which is a benefit of how we're structuring this program to really aid our businesses. They had 847 businesses submit, 520 applications have been approved to date, and the median funding amount is $7,100. City of Phoenix received $293 million through the federal CARES dollars, and they set aside $15 million. And to date, they have awarded $3 million in small business grants through 527 applications. So really what I want you to take away from this slide is the fact that we've had the opportunity to learn from other communities. And initially we were concerned we were falling behind because we didn't get the federal dollars right away. I think in hindsight, this is actually playing out in a very positive way. So we can bring a program forward to our business community that can really get them the assistance they need. So the first part of our program we would like to seek guidance on is a business PPE support program. This was one of the leading factors that we heard as a concern from our businesses is they have a lot of this equipment that they continually have to purchase, and it's just a burden on their bottom line. And so what we had proposed is issuing PPE through a partnership with the chamber or some other nonprofit local business to coordinate the dispersal of PPE equipment to Chandler businesses. We would request to set aside $500,000. The city would go forward, acquire property for dispersal, and then work with our partner entity to get that equipment out into the hands of our businesses, thereby protecting their employees, consumers, and visitors to their places of business. So that's one part of the program. So we're looking to set aside $500,000. You got to remember, this is in addition to the reimbursement that we already have in place through the Chandler IDA program, which is working very smoothly, and we're getting good feedback from the program participants.
So Micah, how is that program doing? What are we seeing so far with the dollars out of the IDA partnership?
There through, as of Friday, we had received 39 applications and funded just under $12,000 in grants.
Okay.
Mayor?
Councilmember Orlando.
So, would your thoughts be to take that program as well and give it to whomever we decide to do for the $500,000 and be able to leverage that team to be able to, because it seems like a grant versus, if I'm a business, I'm gonna look at it and say, well, why should I could get a grant instead of putting in all my, my receipts. Either way, I'm gonna get some kind of money. It will be in addition to, number one. And number two, if I receive, in other words, I already received, the 39 people received the money, will I still be eligible for this program?
Through the
That's first
mayor,
question.
Councilmember Orlando. Yeah, so if you had submitted reimbursements through the Chandler IDA program, you would be eligible for this program in our minds right now. And then I think we need to keep the funds separate just because they're two separate pots of money right now. One's IDA dollars, and this one is with general fund dollars. So we would work with whatever entity to get the equipment out to the businesses in need in a equitable manner.
So it'll be up to that third party to come up with an equitable manner?
Yeah, we would work with the vendor that we select to lay out those programmatic area requirements. Like, do we want to follow the general requirements that we put in place with the IDA program, smaller than 100 employees, non-home-based businesses? So really crafting that out is yet to come. Again, these are just high-level ideas in getting those equipment material out into the business, and this seems like a really effective way to help keep the residents and guests safe.
And one last question, Mayor, if you don't mind, thank you. What about nonprofits? Will be, is that a separate PPE program on this, or are you looking at just purely for profit businesses?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, this program right here is just for business, but I know Leah has
Right.
the nonprofits covered elsewhere in the presentation.
And that'll be done at Aaliyah's office then?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
So Michael, one more question related to that. I just want to make sure it's clear to me. You had mentioned 500,000. You also mentioned purchasing product. So would we be handing people reimbursement dollars for their purchasing product, or would a group be purchasing product and providing that? Or is that to be decided?
Yeah, how we envision it right now is the city would use our bulk purchasing to get better pricing, and then work with our distribution vendor to get it out to the small businesses in an equitable manner.
Okay, thank you. So this wouldn't be necessarily reimbursement like the IDA program. That's why they're complementary, which would reimburse them for what they've spent. This would be actual product, whether it's
Going forward.
clean sanitizers, Clorox, masks, gloves, et cetera.
Correct, Mayor, you're absolutely right.
Okay, thank
So
you.
They can work in tandem. One's to reimburse for previous expenses, and one's moving forward as this plays out over the coming months.
And then the vendor would really be responsible. In essence, there would be some sort of a store or warehouse, something in which they would be the one coordinating people picking up materials.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
That's the high level plan right now, Mayor.
Great. Okay. Any other questions related? Continue.
So the second part of our Easy Cares funding program that we would like to propose is the I Choose Chandler Business Hiring and Retention Program. The purpose of this is a grant to support those businesses impacted by COVID-19. Again, staying within the vein of what we've been requested to do. And the goal is to mitigate job losses and economic hardship. Funding would be provided on a job retention and job hiring agreement level. And it's really to support the businesses that are keeping employees on payroll as they adjust to revenue losses as a result of COVID. So very focused on the intent and purpose of the program. What we would request is $9.5 million in total allocation funding. This would include administration costs involved in getting the dollars out. What we would propose is individual grants to businesses capped at $10,000 or $1,300 per full-time equivalent position. And should we maximize all funding available, we would be able to support approximately 900 plus businesses. So what you're going to see in the next slide will provide some insight as to why we're putting the program together this way. We're really looking to help support the businesses within industry clusters that were most negatively impacted. And those businesses are accommodation and food service, healthcare, and social assistance, obviously retail trade, administrative support, and waste management and remediation services, as well as manufacturing. So these are the industry clusters that saw the greatest job losses as reported by unemployment insurance claims. So these are the areas that serve as a good proxy for who needs the most help. You know, these are the businesses that are really challenged right now, which has been consistent across the business surveys we've seen, as well as the state and federal reporting. So to put it in perspective, what does this look like? We would propose only small businesses to be eligible, and those would be businesses with fewer than 100 full-time equivalent employees citywide. So within these industry clusters, we have about 68,000 jobs, touching approximately 2,000 business locations. So quite a bit of businesses in Chandler that had the opportunity to be severely impacted. So eligibility, what we put around it is private for-profit businesses, not affiliated with another business under common ownership or management that has applied for the grant, not a home-based business. If they are leasing space, they must verify their intent to renew. Again, we're wanting to support our storefronts. We're really wanting to make sure we don't see front-facing retail go vacant if we can. We have a business start date of 3/11, which is to stay consistent with the governor's emergency declaration. And all businesses seeking grant must be registered with the city's tax and licensing division. This is an ongoing challenge. I know Don Shop is consistently working on trying to get more participation and people registered. So if they want to participate in the program, they need to get signed up through tax and licensing as a registered business.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you, Micah. Hey, back to the eligibility slide that we were just chatting about. Where did you get, I know that this was this is a crisis, an economic crisis, really affected hourly employees or people that are in the service industry. Do you have a link or any data to get that unemployment information by industry? Because you did use that for a lot of the work you did here. I know we talked briefly about that.
Yeah.
I'd love to get my hands on that.
Through the mayor, council member, tomorrow we'll get you the weekly unemployment insurance claims, which was the guiding document for selecting the businesses that we would target first.
So just to be clear, that those industries like restaurants, retail, they got really hammered, especially by the shutdown, is where the majority of these funds will hopefully go to?
That's due to the job losses incurred within those industries.
That's
correct.
great, thank you.
Councilmember McClements.
Micah, the gyms, they're not under accommodation, are they?
They are not treated,
Are they in any of these
the
categories?
gym, no, they would not be treated under, that would be in a different industry class. I would have to go back and double check just to verify.
So are you saying that they're not in one of these categories?
To my knowledge, I do not believe gyms are included in either of these, but they could fall under retail trade. I would have to double check their North American Industrial Classification Systems code.
I'd want to make sure that they'd be included in that discussion. Thanks.
And I would concur, I would agree with that.
Councilmember Orlando. Thank you, Mayor. Since we're on eligibility, so some of these businesses, these 2,000, and I'm assuming got PPP money. How do we differentiate from that? Or are we, or should we, in order to maybe help this go a little bit further?
The approach we've taken through the mayor, council member, is we're treating them all the same, whether they receive PPP or didn't. So that is not a distinguishing characteristic at this time.
Why is that? Just curious. What's your thought process behind that?
Our thought process was if you, let's say you receive PPP and you fall in your hotel, those businesses are still really challenged. And so if we have the opportunity to provide them assistance through other means to keep people on the payroll, let's go ahead and see if we can help out that business.
Yeah, I guess and I understand your logic, I guess, but let's talk a little bit about that. I got a 1 or 2 person shop, maybe a 3 person shop, and yet I have a hotel that has maybe 100 people. This 1, 2, 3 person shop, they don't have the luxury of this 100 people or 15 people or something to go do the grant application. And I know it's going to be simple, or even know about this. So, some of the business that took advantage of this obviously had some bench strength that they could rely on to help them write the grant or fill out the forms, get the W-9s, all that stuff. Some of these smaller businesses may not have that opportunity. So I'm just asking to think about that a little bit more, because, I'm at a disadvantage. I'm a 3 person shop, or I own a furniture store at the mall. It's me and 2 other people, okay? I mean, versus, and I'm not going to pick on a hotel chain or pick on a larger, let's say, a larger, business of 100 people. I'm just, again, just thought the process. Just think about it a little bit more. I don't know if there's extra points they could get. I just don't want to see this money go real quick to those agencies that could leverage their staff versus somebody that can't leverage their staff to make this happen.
Through the mayor, Councilor Orlando, that's a good question. And just like we did with the IDA grant, we're trying to build a program that's easily accessible for everybody. So your points will taken, and we're in agreement. We'll take a look at, how, whether or not we want to make receiving PPP as an excluding factor. Our thought process is if they're here in Chandler and operating and they're hiring and adding people, great. The PPP loan side of it was to keep people on the payroll. A lot of those funds went fast. And so they're still struggling to make payrolls in a lot of cases. So if it's $1,300 an employee or up to $10,000 per applicant, we know it's not going to carry them on, but it will help keep people on payroll a little bit longer. So that was our thought process.
I understand. I get that. I'm not trying to, get to the weeds really here, but it's important that we make sure everyone has an equal opportunity, and I understand that. So, but my bigger question right now is, like many of us up here in this room, we've been going to small businesses, takeout, things like that. And one of my first questions to them is usually, how's it going? And do you know about this PPE program? And they're looking at me saying, no. Again, 1, 2 people shop, 3 people shop. What else can we do? Can we do business cards? Can we visit people? I mean, I'm trying to figure out how to get the word out to them. I mean, I'm literally writing on the back of my card the website. I'm seriously trying to give it to them. Say, here, go to the website. Is there anything way we could, they're not, the words, I know we're doing the best we could. I get that. And I give you guys all the credit in the world. But they're still not getting out to the people that need it.
Through the
Or
mayor,
need to know about it.
Councilmember, this is a problem. This is what we've seen in other communities in getting businesses to engage and do the process they need to. And that's why we were trying to keep the application process simple, keep the net wide to try and capture as many people. We are buying ads, pushing media, working with Kappa, Nextdoor, the Chamber, East Valley Partnership, GPAC to get more people engaged, because we want to get these dollars out. On the PPE grant, I don't know if people are as motivated because it's just 100 to 500. We're hoping if the sum is larger, up to $10,000, people might be a little bit more motivated to get their grants applications in quicker, because it will be on a first come, first served basis. So I completely agree with you. Whenever we're going out to lunch, we're talking to folks or getting your haircut, like, hey, did you fill out your grant application? No, I got to get it in, or I didn't know about it. So I share your sentiment and your feedback, and we'll definitely continue to spend money on
Or
marketing the
get
program.
me a stamp, I'll stamp my back of my business card, at least make it easier for me, okay?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Hey, we'll get you a QR code. Just take a picture of it, send them to the website to download the
There you go,
link.
yeah.
So Micah, related to Councilmember Orlando's question, this does seem though that by the nature, since the money is not going to be large, that it would be more appealing to a small mom and pop shop rather than a larger 100-employee base, because $10,000 to them is less significant than perhaps someone with 3 or 4 employees who could max this out. So by nature, it does seem like it will drive itself, if they hear about it and the process works, to the smaller mom and pops that we're talking about, correct?
So Mayor, if I'm hearing you correctly, are you asking staff to take a look at bringing down the number of FTEs?
No, is it my
eligible?
mask?
Maybe.
So no, I'm just a comment. It does seem to me that the very nature of the amount of dollars that we're giving will be more appealing to a smaller mom and pop shop rather than someone with 100 employees where they might think, well, that's $10,000. I'm looking for bigger fish, as opposed to it could really make a difference to a hair salon or a restaurant in a greater sense than someone with a larger number of employees, correct?
Through the mayor, yeah, that's absolutely correct. If you're a sole proprietor, you're an employer of one, you and yourself, it would be $1,300. That $1,300 to a, a sole proprietor, retailer, goes a lot further than it does to a major corporation, which is why we kept it to less than 100 employee, full-time FTEs of 100.
Councilmember Rowe.
Yeah, and that's, thank you, Mayor. And on that subject, it might be a little far-fetched, but I know you're trying to get it done rather quickly. Is there any possibility that our tax folks who got no use this year or unable to, could they possibly volunteer or be used to volunteer to reach out to folks and give us one extra way to reach out and touch folks a little bit?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Rowe, I don't want to speak for Don's team, but they've been great. We've been working with them and utilizing their distribution list to send mass emails to all the businesses in Chandler, surveys, following up. And I know Don's team has been working really closely on the PPE grants to follow up with them, make sure they have all the information, because we want to get these dollars out, to your
Yeah,
point. So
I know a lot of the volunteers that didn't get used this year for taxes, they just want to help out. So
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
wonder if there's not a possibility for some additional. And
Good idea.
And obviously, it's a volunteer thing, so you have to decide whether to do that or not. But that's it. Thank you.
So
Good idea.
Councilmember,
Thank
you're
you.
talking about the VITA program, not Dawn's employees, correct? Okay, thank you. All right, proceed.
Okay. So getting to the grant, one of the things we have to be cognizant of is the legal implications of any grant program using city general fund dollars. And so in an effort to be conservative and protect the city, we've run economic and fiscal impact analysis on these industries. And we've created averages in terms of the amount of revenue one FTE generates to the city, which is approximately $1,300. So that's how we got to that number. We backed into what we can reasonably anticipate receiving from having this industry cluster job taking place in Chandler, which for the first tranche of industries would be $1,300 per employee annually. Businesses would receive the $1,300 for those they've retained or hired, up to a maximum grant amount of $10,000. So if you're bigger than that, let's say you have 12 employees, you're going to get maxed at 10,000. If you're smaller than that, it could be 1,300 up. So again, these are really smaller grants intended to help small businesses really get into Councilmember Orlando's questions of helping those who really need the dollars. And so if you added more, you kept more people on, that's great, but you're not going to be able to get more than 10,000. And that's really in an attempt to stretch these dollars for those who really need it the most, and that's our Chandler small businesses. So we did a lot of back-end economic and fiscal work within these industry clusters to come up with a average benefit to the city per job that I think really is a unique and creative solution to make sure we're going about this in a prudent method.
So, Mayor,
Councilmember Orlando.
that's a good way of defining this. Is this what you normally use for your economic development processes and for like retention and recruiting of new businesses?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, it is. We will run fiscal and economic impact modeling based on those project specifics, which we have as part of the project. Through this modeling, we had to go out and do extensive research across all the industry clusters to come up with a average business that fits within each of these clusters to use as inputs to kick out the average FTE benefit to the city. So it is the same type, just with a lot more research going in on the back end for a couple dozen different industry clusters.
So I guess my question is, it's consistent to what the state does in some respects when they're involved with our economic recruitment activities and what we do. In other words, it's pretty consistent by going by FTE versus just arbitrarily saying, here's the amount of money for you.
Through the mayor, councilmember, that is correct. There's a lot of different ways development agreements get structured. Chandler, we look at the net economic benefit, usually structured around jobs. So you are correct. It is consistent with how we approach economic development deals for a major attraction project, if you would.
Okay.
So I'm thinking of this as a incentive for existing businesses as opposed to just the attraction side.
Retention. Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So part of this, we're looking to go out and find a program administrator to help process the applications. We want to get these dollars out quickly. So we have a grant RFP that's on the street for a third-party administrator. The individual or firm selected would be tasked with marketing, processing the applications, distributing the grant funds, and providing weekly reports back to the city on jobs retained, jobs created, within the industry clusters, amount of grants given out, and so forth. That RFP closes tomorrow. We issued that in advance of today's presentation just to get ahead of the game, should council want to move forward with this. And so procurement closes at 4 p.m. tomorrow. I don't know how many people have responded to date. We had our kickoff meeting last week with potential contractors, so we're excited to get this process going if this is something that the city would want to do. That is it for me. Through the mayor, Councilmember Wong, that is correct. That's part of the RFP process that closes tomorrow. So we'll get that feedback from all those potential vendors at the end of the day tomorrow.
Okay, we have a guideline for them already?
Excuse me?
Do we already have a guideline for them?
Our guidelines are generally what we've set out here
Mhm.
in terms of what we will be looking at pending city council direction and authorization.
Okay, so it will be a committee, or it will be just an individual, or I'm a little bit, yeah.
So through the mayor, council member, there could be, what we would do is we would set up the eligibility guidelines.
Yeah.
Would work with the selected vendor to follow all those guidelines before funds are released to them. And so everything that they would judge an application on would be set by the city and city council before any funds are dispersed.
Okay, so, okay, thank you.
So the RFP that we sent out, that does not dip into the 9.5 million that's been set aside for the distribution, is that correct?
Through the mayor, it does. That's part of the program administration costs that are inclusive.
Okay, so no, 9.5 includes the administration costs for disbursements. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor. Great presentation, Mike, and I appreciate the difference in what you've done compared to other cities that receive the direct CARES Act funding from the federal government. It looks like, in just some quick numbers, like for example, Mesa received about three times the amount of funding that we received, but it looks like we're doing twice as much infusion of grant money into the market. And it's not going to rent and things like that. It's literally going to employees for job retention to keep the employment up. And so I want to commend you for that. And I think the big difference here is that that will stimulate the economy internally, hopefully because it keeps people employed. And it won't just go to a landlord that may be based in California or something like that. And the fact that your proposal here is twice the amount of money that some of these other cities are putting into the economy is remarkable. And I think you heard us loud and clear in our meeting on the 11th that that's what we were hoping for. I know that later on in the on slide 17, there is sort of a pie chart of how things are going to be broken out. Is there any plan to take some of that residual money and set it aside in case this money goes quick and some people kind of get left out in the cold, that we can continue to support that? So will there be additional monies like in reserve set aside specifically for this? Because I think this program is outstanding in comparison to what other cities are doing with this funding. And it's going directly into the market. I'd just like to see a little bit more in case it gets sucked up real quick.
Through the mayor, council member, to answer your first statement, I don't even know if it was a question, but just for a point of clarification, the grants don't go directly to the business, don't go directly to the employees. They go to the employers for keeping those individuals on payroll, supporting the economy. So I know you understand the program. I just want our television viewers to understand that process. Yeah, make sure there's no confusion that it's not going to be direct checks cut to employees. It's going to the business entity. Your second question, there will be funds available. I'll let council member or city manager Reed handle that portion.
Mayor, Councilmember Stewart, yes, we are proposing a reserve tonight or today, but with that, obviously council has the discretion at any time to put more funds into this if it's the wishes of council out of that contingency.
Thank you, Mayor.
Proceed.
And I'd happy to take any other questions you may have regarding this. We're really excited about it. We think it's a novel solution in putting these puzzle pieces together with some very challenging strings attached. And I think we did it in a way that really impacts and supports those businesses most negatively impacted during this COVID incident.
I like the program. I like the direction, and I thank you for listening to us, city manager and staff, to get a significant portion of this dollars directly out into the business community most affected. So thank you.
All right, Mayor and Council. Well, Leah's coming up to talk about the vulnerable population in the presentation. I just want to take a second to thank Micah, Kelly, Jenny, I know is involved, but all of the directors that have been at the table talking about this, because this has been very complicated, quite frankly, and so really do appreciate the work they've all put into the presentation today. So with that, Leah's going to talk about the vulnerable population.
Mayor?
Councilmember Orlando.
Thank you, sir. Before Leah gets started, Leah, there's been a lot of chatter. This is just a little bit outside, but it does include what we're trying to do here. The Home Matter Arizona Fund, and then the CARES funding for rental assistance. Does your office get involved in any of that stuff, or is that just directly through the state, or how does that work? Because there was a couple articles over the last couple of weeks about that money not being distributed fast enough, and et cetera. And I'm wondering, is there something we as a city could do, your office could do, to get some of that money in here?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, the way that our department interacts with that is through the Community Action Program, which is the CAP, which, as you know, is Ascend is our CAP agency for Chandler. So a lot of the dollars are trickling down through the county to those CAP offices. And I think what's happening, part of what's happening is the fact that there's an infrastructure challenge with all of a sudden they're having to gear up to take millions of dollars to be able to allocate it. So one of the things that I'll talk about in our proposal is some assistance that we want to give to the CAP office on both ends when it comes to working with the public, adding constituent assistance to see if we can't help triage people that are coming into our offices rather than just referring them directly to the CAP office. And then on the back end, position that would help with getting families that could go on almost like a family self-sufficiency program that we run, similar to what we run in public housing, but doing this through the families that are coming out of the CAP office to see if we can't get people towards self-sufficiency. So we are staying in communication with them on a regular basis and trying to help them in any way that we think we can. You'll see, one of the things that you'll see should you approve the direction that we want to move is that there will be funding for the CAP office to help with additional personnel to help allocate funds. So that is one way that we do interact with
No,
it.
and let me just follow up question, Mayor. I understand what the CAP office is doing for the less fortunate, but these two programs, what I understand, are for statewide, supporting people in general for rent, mostly for rent. So we're not involved with that at all? That's what I'm trying to figure out. That was my question.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, I did go onto the state's webpage, and what it did is when I went in to see how it was working, it did direct it right back to the CAP office, to the local CAP office, at least for the rental portion of it.
So if
So
I'm out of work and I live in one of the downtown apartments here, you know, one of the ones over here, and I go in there, it goes directly to the CAP office, even though regardless of my income level?
through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, yes, there was an application, like an online form, a survey type form that you could fill out on that website, but it directed it right back into the CAP offices for distribution.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to have staff take another look at it, see if anything has changed, maybe with any of the challenges that they're having in distributing the funds. But when I did look at it, that was the direction that
Yeah,
the website pointed me
Yeah, if you
into.
don't mind, I'd like to take a look at that. I know if there's something cities could get involved with, maybe not. I just curiously, because not much of the money's being distributed, and by come 1 August, we may have a whole bunch of people out of homes rentals, particularly rentals. That's what these two programs were set up for, I assume.
Yes,
Okay.
through the mayor, Councilmember Lum, that is absolutely one of our concerns, and I can show you some of the figures that we're looking at as
Okay.
we go through the
Thank you,
presentation.
Mayor. I just wanted to get that baseline of what those programs are about before we get into these. Thank you.
Proceed, Leah.
So as you know, we communicate with our nonprofits all of the time, but certainly with COVID hitting, we have upped our communication that we have with the nonprofits. And what we wanted to do was take a look at what additional resources they need. So we did a supplemental type application that went out to those agencies that are already scheduled to receive funds as of July 1. This is an action that you took to approve back in June with the regular general fund. And we have 41 agencies that are receiving those general funds, and of the 41, 32 responded to the supplemental questionnaire. As you can see, there was about $1.2 million in requests. And what we were also able to gain through doing the supplemental application are what are some of the common challenges that are facing the nonprofits. We're finding that some have anywhere from about a 30 to 80% increase for needs for services. One of the examples I wanted to share with you actually touches on the first bullet point as well as the second, that nonprofits are, or excuse me, the last, that nonprofits are having to do business a little bit differently. Driving our veterans program through Resurrection Street Ministries, they shared with us that they haven't seen an increase in clients, but because of who they serve as a population, their clientele is staying at home, and they have an increase in needs for services being delivered to the home. So they actually have an 80% increase in services because of the way that everything has had to be adapted, and now they are bringing the services to the veterans versus taking veterans out into the public for appointments and things like that. As Councilmember Orlando said, we are looking at many families facing eviction. If you think about families that maybe lost a job in March, they're probably already 3 months behind in rent or very close to that. The way that the funding is working that's coming through the CAP offices, that's coming through the county, is they can pay up to 3 months rent at a total of $1,500 per family. Some of our families are already going to be at that 3-month mark. So what we are wanting to do is with the city general fund, be able to help stabilize that. Maybe it's a 4th month of rent, maybe it's a 5th month of rent, being able to wrap around because there's more flexibility with our dollars and stabilize those families. And along with that goes homelessness. The estimates are there's going to be a 40% increase in homelessness. And I can tell you just from what we're seeing in our office, I believe we're already there. We may even have surpassed that. And then looking for new resources in the community. What we want to be able to do out of our office is to try to find more resources, not just those traditional, but we know that there are people in the faith community, for example, or there are other nonprofits that we're not already working with. And looking and finding out what those resources are to be able to pass those on and help the nonprofits that way. And of course, it's however we can help support our nonprofits in their business. Like I said, many have had to do a new service delivery model. And along with that is because they've had such a reduction in volunteers. We have had reports of the nonprofits that up to 70% reduction in their volunteers. And the only way to fill that need is to actually hire staff. So now they have that increased cost for staff. We asked the question specifically about PPE. You can see there that was over almost $300,000 requested for PPE assistance. And a lot of what's happening is that's not something that anybody anticipated having. And then the flip side to it is they've also had to cancel their fundraisers. Some have been able to go to virtual fundraisers, but they're just not bringing in the donations like they did before. And we've even seen with some of our fee-based programs that they've had a big reduction. We had one agency that closed for the month of March, and they had almost a $500,000 reduction in revenue for closing that 1 month. So these are really common trends that we saw throughout speaking with our nonprofits. Again, looking at our office, how can our office help? So this is where the community outreach portion comes in, and this is what I was talking about, identifying the solicitation of resources, finding other resources in the community and creating those partnerships and making those partnerships work. We have been very fortunate in Chandler that businesses start to come to us when they want to support things, when they want to give donations, when they want to volunteer, and we help marry them with different nonprofits. And we want to continue to be able to do that. One of the things, for example, we have been getting donations of PPE almost on a weekly basis that we've been able to get out to nonprofits. Even just most recently last week, there were some that were shared with nursing homes, things like that. The constituent assistance is something I feel is very important right now. We don't want to just pass another person on to the CAP office and just add to the log of people that they have coming through the CAP office, not knowing if this person is going to qualify for the resources there or if it's the best fit for them. So we want to be able to do a better job of really triaging that with the constituents. We have some facility improvements that we need. We have a need for a bathroom for the residents coming into our office because of some of the different populations that we work with, and that's been something that we need to control. So that's what that facility improvement is. Tenant retention, trying to keep people housed. It's much cheaper to keep somebody housed than have them get evicted, go into the homelessness services and get them rehoused. So how can we really put a focus on that tenant retention? And going along with that is the landlord recruitment. When we do have vouchers to get to people, we have a tough time sometimes getting landlords that understand the Section 8 program or the TBRA program, and how can we continue to recruit those landlords and have them benefit from that program and find affordable housing for our clientele. As you know, we're dealing with a vulnerable low-income population. We were fortunate to have one of the nonprofits in the community had some testing, and so we did some testing of homeless and other low-income population in the downtown area. And what we found is that this population group wasn't going to the testing sites that were set up, especially those that are experiencing homelessness. They don't have transportation to begin with. They're not going to go wait in hours of lines, don't have a car, all of those kind of things. So we put some funding in for COVID testing. This also allows people to get people into shelter quickly. Right now, iHelp is functioning in such a way that they've had to reduce numbers, as most of the shelters have, because of the social distancing. But if they have the ability to test on a daily basis, then they can expand those numbers again. So we would be working with iHelp and other who are servicing our homeless population. And finally, the rental mitigation fund. One of the things that makes landlords hesitant to rent to a population that has had multiple evictions is the concern about, well, what's going to happen if there's damage to my apartment? This is something that the state has done and has been successful in other cities to be able to put a small pot of money for just that, to be able to say, okay, beyond the $500 deposit or the $700 deposit, here's some additional money. Should something happen, we would use these funds to help cover that, and it makes landlords much more amenable to the program. So going out to the agencies, the numbers that you're going to see next are what we heard from the agencies and took a look at what their needs are. I know probably at first glance the food and basic needs number seems very low. The reason for that is there is a lot of food in Chandler right now. We're hearing from all of the food banks that they have so much food. They're giving out much more food than they ever did, 5 boxes to a person. But they still have challenges with the infrastructure piece. Like I said, they've lost volunteers, might have to hire staff. We've had some that have needed to get rent freezers, things like that. So there is some infrastructure piece into what we would give to the food banks. And then the same thing with the clothing banks, those the donations are down there. Diaper banks, certainly, we know that there's need for additional diapers and product there. But also that infrastructure for those agencies. This is an area that down the road, and we'll talk about reserves later, but this is an area that down the road we feel like would probably take another look, maybe when some of the federal money for food has run out, and to see if there's more assistance that would be needed in this area. Homeless and housing, this is based again on those agencies that are currently providing services. With the increase in homeless population, we definitely have the need for more navigation services. And of course, there's the need to support more shelter for those agencies that are running. We have heard that our domestic violence shelters are full, completely full. We know our homeless shelters are full, but we want to be able to get people, as soon as something opens up, get them back into shelter as soon as we can. With the fact that through across Chandler and other parts of the valley, everybody's experiencing an additional challenge with heat relief this year. Places where people who are experiencing homelessness would have gone before, maybe it's the libraries, maybe it's certain stores, whatever, to get, even our office building, to get out of the heat, there's not as much availability with that anymore. CAP office is full, same kind of thing. So we have one nonprofit in the community who is willing to do heat relief. We would reach out, of course, to others to see, but this would give us that opportunity to have a place where people can go when they're experiencing homelessness during the summer and these high heat days. The eviction prevention and rehousing, this is one I'm extremely excited about. We have an organization that would look at doing rapid rehousing along with employment services, which you see in the next one, to try to get people shored up again a little bit. And then also that eviction prevention, like I talked about before, with the city's got more flexibility with our dollars than what's coming down from the county at this point. So this would be all about, let's try to keep people housed, and if they do become homeless, let's get them rehoused as fast as we can with those wraparound services.
Mayor. Councilmember Orlando. Thank you, sir. Go back to that slide, community navigational.
Yes.
What's your thoughts around that? What are you trying to do here?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, this would pay for an additional, actually 2 navigators. Would give us 2 more homeless navigators that will be out in the community working with people. Right now, we have 2 navigators. One of them is working with the people that we have that are the vulnerable population that we put up into hotels. And all of their case management is surrounding that group. And so that leaves us with just 1 navigator for the whole rest of the city. And again, with some of the challenges, people that maybe used to go to the library and kind of stayed there all day, they're out in the street and we're having just more and more challenges. This would give us additional navigators to be able to try to get people into services as soon as possible.
So these will be full-time navigators for how long, a year or?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, yes, it would be 2 navigators through at least the remainder of this fiscal year.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Finally, our senior and special populations group, again, as you know, seniors extremely vulnerable. We're trying hard to keep them at home, and so we have heard from About Care and Neighbors Who Care, the agencies that we work with, about their increases in service, and believe me, they're going up all the time. They just, again, have probably more than what they can handle right now, so there's additional funding to help shore that up. Our senior meals, the senior meals did not receive 100% of the funding requests that they asked for through the allocations that we just did, so this would shore that up to 100%. Talked to you about the veterans transportation already. And then the crisis stabilization and medical services, these are things that we see on a year-round basis. We contract with Community Bridges for this. Again, people who can go out into the field and whether it's a park, whether it's a bench along the street, be able to respond to that. So we feel like there's definitely a need. This is also a community. We reached out to some of our agencies that work with people with disabilities and some additional senior programs. And right now, they're still trying to figure out their programming. This could be an area that we would also look at later on down the road when they try to figure out how they can run the program in the new environment. And that also holds true for our youth and after-school programs. The programs that you see listed are programs that are currently running right now. The medical and dental clinic, they have gone to virtual, but when they get up and running, they feel like they're going to have an influx of people who will be coming. So that would be something else we would want to look at down the road, as well as giving us some additional funding now. Childcare, tremendous need for PPE in a childcare environment, as you can imagine. Plus, there's more and more requests for scholarships for childcare. And then the intercession and summer programs. we're working with all of the nonprofits that serve youth, as well as maybe if it's an after-school program, and we're monitoring when their programs are actually able to go up and running. So any funds that we are allocating for these programs, we're going to continue to work with them, and we won't execute that contract till we know that the program is going to go. But this, of course, would be an area that once things are figured out with schools down the road, this may be another area where there's a need for additional funding once they figured out how some of these programs are going to run.
Well, I was wondering if we're still calling them summer programs.
Through the Mayor, that's a great point. I know we've struggled with that too. We're like, well, it's intercession and extended summer maybe, but exactly, we're taking a look at those programs that are staying open while the kids are out of school, and then those that will hopefully be going back once they are in school.
Thank you.
Whatever that looks like. And then this is the PPE and cleaning piece of this. As you can see, we've asked to allocate $200,000 to this. Again, we looked at all those different agencies. Depending on what type of service they have, it really varied on the type of PPE they need. But when you look at like the shelters and childcare, they are doing the deep cleaning, disinfecting like we at the city are doing, and they're doing it on a weekly basis. So there is a big cost for that. And then, of course, cleaning supplies. Nobody thought that they were going to need the cleaning supplies that they're having to use today. Again, we get donations in our office as far as the PPE goes, and we work with our fire department and determine what can go out to the community, if anything is needed in-house, and we just work together on making sure that we've gotten quite a bit out to the nonprofit community of the donations that have come in.
So Leah, our city manager, maybe one of you can best answer this. And so with the IDA program, that 200,000 that was predominantly or it was set up for businesses, if we find funds being available for whatever reason, can this be extended to the nonprofits, or because the way it's set up with the IDA, it's restricted to businesses? Can one of you answer that for me, or am I off base here?
Mayor, actually, I'm going to let Dawn answer that question.
Okay, thank you, Dawn.
Mayor, there we go. The IDA program can certainly be extended beyond for-profit. I know it's to help businesses in our community, but I don't recall there being a for-profit or nonprofit differentiation. But when we talked to them about the program, they were open to continuing it should the program be successful.
Okay.
And we'd look at those requirements again.
Thank you. It just seems that it's a great program, and I commend your staff for doing that, but if it continues to be underutilized, it would seem like a good fit to also reimburse some of our nonprofits for expenditures already had, as opposed to this would be starting new, I'm assuming, not just reimbursement. Is that correct?
Yes, Mayor, we would actually allocate the funds through the general fund contract that they'll be receiving. We've held those contracts a few days to see how all of this worked out, but they do get that funding in advance.
Okay, thank you.
This is just a summary of the community support, so you can see the bottom line there and all of the categories added together and what we're asking at this point for the support for the community. And again, that later on in the presentation, you'll see a piece on reserves, and we had hoped that in the future that we could take a look at some of these other needs again in the future with that reserve funding.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you, Leah. Great presentation. And you know what? I mean, I'm not sure if that's enough money. And why I'm saying that is I think we're going to have some challenges with school starting. We're going to have some challenges with, we talked about earlier that this has really affected a certain service industry community that has to go to work. Trying to turn the economy back on at the same time. I think you're going to have some challenges with daycare. I think you're going to see some needs from CUSD, Kyrene, a number of the school districts. And I'm wondering if there's some ways that we could hopefully support some of their efforts. Do you know anything that they've got going on? Is there anything way we can create some synergy with the city? And I just don't know if this is going to be enough to support. And I'm really just genuinely concerned about the kids that are in that elementary age that are going to need daycare and things like that. What are your thoughts?
Through the Mayor, Councilmember Stewart, it's kind of an interesting time right now. What we are hearing is, for the most part, some of those numbers are down in those programs, but I think that's because people are still trying to figure it out. And I think you're right that once people start to figure it out, or families reach a point where they have to go back to work, they can't stay home with kids anymore, that's when we're going to see the need. And that's why we really want to be able to continue to monitor what's happening with the youth service providers, because I don't think that the picture today is necessarily what it's going to look like 2-3 months down the road or beyond that. So we have the ability certainly to be able to go back out at some point with another supplemental application. We will also be going out with their annual applications in October, and I think that's something I probably should have mentioned before. Our allocation process starts in October, and those applications are due in November. Certainly last year in October, November, nobody knew this is what the world was going to look like today. But through that process, we would have the ability to do another simple questionnaire. I feel like we could get at any point, should there be a portion of money that we want to see out to those agencies, or we want to see that feedback from those agencies, we have the ability to turn around very quickly that piece of it. This application, we got it out on I think it was a Thursday, it was due back on Tuesday, and we processed it, so we had it ready for your presentation this week.
Thank you, Leah. And I would like to see it, and I don't know if the rest of the council mayor are supportive. I'd like to see it try to reach in for a few more dollars initially, and at least get some in reserve that you know you can get to.
So Councilmember Stewart, I'm glad to see that I'm hearing you come around for a contingency fund that would allow us to further fund any of these things that we're talking about when need provides. So.
I'm not sure what you're talking about, Mayor.
Mayor?
Councilmember Orlando.
Thank you, Mayor. So Leah, you got a direct deposit, a direct allocation from the federal government by $800,000. How is that going?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando. So as you know, we worked quickly to get the applications, get all of those back in, bring them to you for approval, and then we ran into a time delay with HUD. But the good news is our funds just were released last week, so we can go ahead and we're getting the contracts out this week. Unfortunately, due to that time lapse with HUD, we were not able to get the contracts out until now. We had to wait till we had their final approval on that. But we have the ability to, those agencies can bill back to March 1st, and so that's what we're working with them right now.
Okay, so you're looking at about $2.4 million, $2.5 million with this money plus the $800,000 you got from HUD.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, that's correct. It was like $849,000.
Yeah, so it's pretty close. Okay. So the other question I had for you came up earlier about program administration fees. What do you normally look at these, 10%? How do you normally look at program administration fees?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, it depends on the program. So those that are federally funded, the larger agencies have a set of rate that HUD approves. For the smaller ones, we usually try to take no more than 20% for the administration. And that's written into the criteria that the city uses when we allocate those general funds, is that we cap it at 20%.
So these will basically be capped at 20%?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, that is correct. We would look to make sure that there wasn't administration that exceeds that. That said, for the most part, the applications that came in, a lot of them focused more on that program delivery and not as much certainly on the administration, but we did take a look at that.
So that was a little bit higher administration fees, what I'm hearing you say. The original, yeah.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, I'm sorry, for the general fund applications or the
$800,000, that was programmatic fees, and that was a little bit higher?
Yes, through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando. So through the $849,000, there is a piece of the administration that we take as the city to be able to run the programs. And then those rates that went out to those agencies are the ones that the federal government usually comes up. But honestly, their rates usually are pretty much in line, close to that 20% too. It could vary a little bit depending on the nature of what that agency does, but they have to submit documentation to get that approved rate through HUD.
So what is your program fees on these, 10%?
Oh, through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, nothing. We actually, the only thing we take any program administration out of my office is the 3% on the social service funding and the youth enhancement program funding that we do through the general fund allocations. Now, of the community outreach piece, we are looking at some of those positions being, they would just be temporary staff positions that we would have housed in our office so that we can make sure that they're going out and really doing kind of the work where we see it best fits the community. But as far as all those other pots of money, that's all going out to the agencies. We don't take any administration on
Right,
that.
so basically between 3 and 20% is what the fees are in some of these programs.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, yes, so 3% is what the city keeps only on those other two pots of money, and then everybody else is probably closer to that 20%.
20%. Okay, thank you, Mayor.
So 0 to 20%. in essence of it. Yeah.
Yes, Mayor, that's correct, 0 to 20%, yes.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Leah. Continuing on, city manager.
All right, thank you, Mayor. So I'll ask Sandeep to come forward. Mayor and council, no different than any other business out there. The city is also a business. We are a business that runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And with that, and with the COVID issues, we definitely have some needs in the areas of operational continuity and capital investment. So I'm going to let Sandeep give you a discussion on what we're proposing here. Sandeep.
Thank you, thank you, City Manager, Mayor, council members. With the citizen engagement, what we saw is really two areas that we're going to be focusing on in our recommendation. One is citizen engagement, the other one being really on the mobility aspect of when a pandemic hits or a scenario like what we've experienced in the past few months hits, our ability to be nimble and flexible to accommodate the services, keep the continuity of everything that the city does in terms of services that we provide. From a citizen engagement perspective, our real focus was making Chandler a leader in serving citizens through innovation when these types of scenarios hit us, without any kind of loss of services, business continuity, and whatnot. Many of the solutions that we have right now in the city are dated. They're not necessarily easily or securely accessible from citizens, by the citizens, right? Whether it's at home, in the comfort of their home, or even if they're out and about and from a mobile standpoint. The other observation that we saw during the course of the last few months is many of the services require in-person interaction with city staff. And so what we're going to be doing is looking closely at what those services are, and I'll talk to that in a little bit here. The outdated technology in itself really slows down the ability for the city to quickly launch virtual citizen engagement. And that's the infrastructure side that you'll hear me talk about. And those solutions really become throttled or bottlenecked. And so, there you go. And so that's really on the citizen engagement side. From the mobility side, what we saw is that we had to really quickly swing our workforce to the best of our ability to be able to be working in a more remote environment given the pandemic. We were able to successfully get 700 employees, up to 700 employees to be able to work remote. What we saw though is that's not a sustainable model given the technologies that we have. The majority of our workstations are desktop in nature. And so with the fleet of laptops that we did have on hand, that was still a very, very minor percentage of folks that were able to do so using city-owned assets or workstations. For that reason, the use of personal devices at home on their personal computers ended up having to be something that we allowed for this temporary period of time. And that, of course, introduces a lot of security vulnerabilities and, of course, any kind of performance issue based on the model of, the make and model of that computing device that the employee has. Bandwidth issues was something that we closely monitored throughout the course of the past 2-3 months. And what we saw is that those bandwidth issues, when you had peak hours throughout the day, would actually throttle the ability for employees to be able to work remotely effectively. Oftentimes we saw timeouts, and we've kept good data throughout the course of the last 3 months in terms of the call volumes that came through just based off of performance issues, connectivity issues. So the final aspect of it is because of the fact that we would have a lot of the personal devices that were being used, we don't have any support that we do on the personal devices of the employees. So anything that is required from a patching standpoint to manage those devices, that's really out of our hands because they're not obviously city assets. And so what you'll see is a recommendation that will really hit focus on addressing a lot of these. The final aspect that we took a close look at is the inability to effectively hold large and interactive virtual meetings or virtual engagements with the public at large, as well as internally, right, from one department to another or a large group of folks. We did see success in some of the solutions that we were able to deploy. Our infrastructure, though, is not really in the stage where that's something that really is sustainable. So from a citizen engagement standpoint, what we're proposing is an amount of $600,000 to be really utilized to look at enhancing mobile-friendly applications, taking a look at our current solution, technology solutions, and really being able to make that something that the citizens can actually use from the comfort of their home, the safety of their home, or even when they're out and about in public. Improve how the city delivers services to the citizens. We're looking at all of the different types of services that do require on-site or on campus, face-to-face or interpersonal interaction, and being able to transform those types of services to ones that can actually be offered virtually. Finally, we're also benchmarking. There's a lot of benchmark underway amongst all of the technology departments across the state and as well as nationwide at looking at various solutions. So there's many communities that we're involved in where we discuss potential areas that we think that there are similarities across the board. So what we're doing there is just looking at opportunities in which we can actually be able to transform the way we deliver the services, not necessarily being so dependent from an in-person standpoint.
Mayor, Councilmember Orlando, so what do we mean here? Give me some specifics of what we mean by enhanced mobile friendly. What does that mean? I mean, we're going to get phones. What are we doing?
That's a great question. So in the $600,000 that we're actually looking at investing in, it's not necessarily devices for city staff. It's more solutions that would be available and accessible by public to the city. Some examples of what we're looking at right now are going to be things like virtual chat, right? So instead of having to pick up the phone or come on site to be able to interact with city staff regarding questions or anything else, the ability to be able to go online and do that kind of interaction online. You may have also had experiences where you go to a website and you're doing some searches, and then up comes a bot, for example, and now you're able to actually do a two-way communication where you might be able to get the information you're looking for without having to necessarily go on site or even have to pick up the phone, for example.
Okay. And what's time frame to implement this?
That would be in the course of the next 12 months. There might be some of those efforts that in deploying these may spill over into the following fiscal year, but in terms of securing the funding and then making the commitments, identifying those solutions that we're going to target, that would be actually initiated, but more than likely it would be within the next 12 months. Okay. We would certainly continue to report progress along what solutions we're targeting and those timeframes.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
So next I'll go to the mobility. The mobility on the other side is really looking at things that we have on hand from an employee workforce perspective in terms of tools to allow us to be much more nimble and flexible to shift the demographics of how we actually deliver the services that which we deliver. If we were not, if we didn't experience what we did, the learning moment that we had was we're not really set up to be in a sustainable fashion, nimble and flexible to deploy staff in a different working environment. And in this case, of course, I'm talking about being able to immediately work remote or immediately work in different facilities than they would normally. We would be doing in the course of this year about 1,343 workstation refreshes. Typically that would be desktops. What we're proposing to do now is actually do a complete refresh moving to a laptop. There will be varying models of laptops depending on job role, and so you might have some where the traditional office type of work that would be done, like myself and a lot of the folks that are here, with a normal laptop. There's field employees also, so we would want to make sure that they're equipped with the right kind of equipment to be able to connect properly. And so from a laptop perspective, for the refresh perspective on the laptops, the total cost of a refresh, if we were to do all 1,343, would actually be $3.4 million, of which the city in the technology replacement fund will be putting in what we normally would put in for desktops, which is the amount of about $2,100,000, just a little bit over that. What we're asking for is really the delta, the difference being in the amount of $1,378,000. With that, obviously, now if we go into a pandemic scenario, you have a lot of employees that are working remote. We need the infrastructure to be able to support that. We were very fortunate in the course of the last 2 to 3 months in that we didn't have any security incidents. We didn't have dramatic performance issues or connectivity issues, but it's not sustainable on the current infrastructure. The infrastructure investment that we're proposing is $3,422,000. And that really goes to things like the performance, the connectivity, and the security, both on the ability for the employee workforce to be remote, as well as some of the other solutions that we talked about with citizen engagement. In terms of that, also, there's going to be peripheral equipment that we anticipate that we would need. For example, headphones, headsets, and other types of devices, various types of printers that might be needed for a workforce that needs to now go home. And of course, it's hard to take the larger printers that you see, the network printers in the office. This will enable us to be able to deploy that type of equipment for that workforce to be able to continue to be able to do the things that they need to do. The other area that we looked in, we did a study of all of the major conference rooms. I know that in the June the 11th meeting, we talked about audio, video, and collaborations, even in this building, other conference rooms at City Hall, and various other conference rooms across the board. What we're proposing here is an investment of $1.8 million. And basically what this really entails is an environment in a conference room where you seamlessly and very easily are able to connect and have a collaborative experience with a group of people, whether it's one individual or another organization, as if you were in the same room. But this enables us to do it much more effectively. You could be sharing documents, you can share files, you can pass that back and forth in terms of control. You have the audio portion and the video portion integrated all into one solution. We've looked at over 30 conference rooms, and what we will do with that 1.8 is really zone in, prioritize, identify which specific conference rooms that we would be looking at to upgrade those to be able to accommodate these types of scenarios. With that, I'm open to taking any questions.
Vice Mayor, then Councilmember McClements.
Thank you. So I want to preface this with being in the technology industry myself. Again, thank you and kudos to your entire team for doing the BYOB or the bring your own device to work and use remotely, and being able to successfully do that in a quick manner with no impacts. And again, that shows to the diligence that you had kept an eye on it. The other part is, I know this looks like a lot of money, but again, with the infrastructure we had, unfortunately, it looks like it's kind of a leap forward. Would you say that we're kind of leapfrogging from the next level technology into a future level of technology that we would be eyeing with this?
Combination of both. One is it puts us in a position to keep up with the trends in technology. In other areas, it absolutely would be a leapfrog, not from being behind, but actually being forward-thinking and innovation.
And second question, our laptop replacements, are we doing a lease or are we purchasing those?
And through the mayor, this would be purchase.
Purchase, good. All right, thank you.
Councilmember McClements.
Thank you, Mayor. We are a community of innovation, and we're also a community that values fiscal discipline. And so I know on an annual basis, for whatever reason, technology sometimes doesn't get the investment it deserves. And myself and several of us on council have been advocating to look inwards for technology to make some improvements. And it's imperative that this pandemic shines some lights on our weaknesses and whatnot. But this pandemic also, through CARES Act funds, provided dollars so we can make a huge impact. And so I just got to say, in what you've accomplished, and are you 1 year now? Are you officially
through the mayor? I am just over 1 year. May 6th was the anniversary.
And that's not a LinkedIn year, right? That's right. So 1 year, but the work you've done in 1 year is incredible. I'm excited to see what you'll do with this funding to really drive home technology, shake out some of our inefficiencies, and drive home the point that we are a community of innovation. So thank you.
Councilmember Orlando. So time frame, priority.
That's through the mayor. Great question, council member. In terms of the priority, what we're really looking at is what is going to have the biggest impact given if we enter a pandemic scenario, right? So what we saw were services that we had to completely shut down. We would work, the IT department would work with the departments that offer the public-facing services, and then be able to prioritize which ones we're going to tackle first. Whether it was lack of communication, whether it was lack of the ability to conduct transactions. Once we have that priority nailed down, the solutions that would actually resolve those types of challenges would be identified, and then we would actually move forward with setting a schedule.
So what's
Our
your,
challenge, sorry.
go ahead, what's your priority?
Our priority right now is, from all of what you've seen presented, I believe it would be, to the mayor, apology, would be the mobility component.
So these laptops, what's the lead time on these things?
Great question. The lead time on the laptop is approximately 2 to 6 weeks. Because of supply chain, of course, there's a lot of other municipalities that are doing the same thing. And so we would obviously be part of that equation in terms of when those laptops can come in. From end to end, from the point at which we actually place the order, our goal would be to be able to get all of the laptops distributed, the refresh completed within a 10-month period. Of course, in that, we would, based off of the information that we put together at the very beginning of March, we would actually prioritize groups based on the types of roles and responsibilities that they had.
All right, that's fair enough. So, and then obviously all this will be software refresh as well? I know we're still on Microsoft 7 in some areas, but I'm assuming we're going to take a real big leap, right?
Through the mayor, council member, absolutely. So when we do the refresh, this will put us in line with the most current version of Office. It will also keep us compatible for when we make the leap into 365.
All right. So I hear the mobility piece is first, infrastructure, laptops, get that done first, and then you work on the other ones.
Through the mayor, correct.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, Mayor.
Councilmember Huang.
Yes, I would like to mention about teleconferencing. I have been pretty disappointed about our ability for teleconferencing, especially during this COVID-19. We realize how important that we are able to communicate through the virtual meetings. So if you may pay some kind of emphasis on this area, we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. City manager.
All right, so if I can get someone to flip the presentation forward really quickly, and we'll let Dawn talk about the need for city PPE.
Discussion on operational and capital investment is the city service PPE. We have just about 1,700 full-time equivalent employees, and we'd be remiss if we didn't make sure that they were properly equipped with PPE. We're proposing a total citywide allocation of $500,000. This would sustain the needs for fire, police, and our other departments through the fiscal year 2021. And as the virus kind of fluctuates in different areas and burn rates change, we've looked at that along to ensure, working with the EOC projections to ensure that this number also included a contingency for those fluctuations. We're also proposing that these funds be used to support facility disinfection needs as they must continue through the year. And we'll eventually get reimbursed through FEMA for these dollars, but there is a delay. We would need the appropriation and the funding immediately for the current year. Okay, moving right along. The next section is financial reserves, and it's been discussed off and on throughout the presentation, the need to address the unknown as things change with the COVID-19 virus, making sure that we're prepared. We've listed a few things here: unanticipated revenue shortfalls, the additional business grant opportunities. As this continues on into the future, there may be another opportunity to help our businesses. As Leah discussed, the housing and nonprofit assistance, and then needs from the fiber master plan in order to really create that backbone that Sandeep is working towards the future on. We're going to need funding in the future for that. And then workspace reconfigurations. We're looking at opportunities across the cities as our needs change adding more partitions and looking at the different ways people are working in this environment, making sure that everyone is safe and secure. Any questions on that? Okay, the final slide before I turn it back to the city manager is just a summary slide on all the funding opportunities discussed during this work session. Almost $30 million. This is the percentage split among all the proposed uses of those dollars, leaving a total reserve of about 33.8% or just over $10 million for the future. With that, turn it back to the city manager.
All right, thank you, Dawn.
City manager.
Thank you, Mayor. So next steps, I believe we have a slide for that there. In terms of going forward from here, it sounds like generally speaking, Mayor and Council was pretty good with the presentation you heard today. We'll go through that. A few things that will need to come forward to approve the grant agreement with the state. So Dawn and Matt Dunbar and the team have actually filed the application. They are pending the council's approval of a resolution on this grant agreement, and we will have the $29.9 million moved over into the city funds. If council was okay with what you heard tonight, which will be something that I will need some wrap up on, Mayor, we can bring on Thursday night an item that would actually move the dollars from contingency into the appropriate departments based on what you heard. Approve additional nonprofit allocation for the AZ Cares. And I know Councilmember Stewart, you'd asked about possibly more, so I'd need a final number from council in order to bring that forward on Thursday. And then also the ability for myself to execute documents related to these programs that you've heard, because it is a month until you all meet again. So based on that, we can get some of these things moving more quickly with that authorization if council so desires. So with that, we'll be looking to wrap up council's thoughts and processes so we know how to move this forward. Mayor.
So let me start, and then we'll work on this end and work our way over to this way. But I like the flexibility. I like the fact that we can set some money aside immediately. And then we also have more funds available based as whether it's Councilmember Stewart or on looking at the community relief or some other areas that we can further allocate. We'll also have the ability to shuffle around. And so to me, I think this is a good first, a very good, not just a fair, but a good first step at taking an adjustment here, and it'll give us the opportunity to be nimble with future funds. But I also agree that I think it would be very helpful for us to move expeditiously on this and be able to allow us to get the dollars out into the community, whether it's the businesses or at risk, as well as being able to get moving on the technology aspects on there. So those are my initial thoughts and brief comments. We'll work our way. Councilmember Orlando.
The only question I have is you asked us to look into what additionally you'd like to add for the nonprofits. I guess my question to you or to Leah is what fell out of the line that you want to add back in there, you think is important to add back in there?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, we did have some agencies that requested funding that were not able to meet the full funding. Some of those were those youth programs that we continue to monitor, so we certainly could look at allocating some of those funds. Again, we would hold those contracts to make sure those programs do get up and running, but that would be one of the areas. We had one food bank that we didn't fully fund, so that could be another area. And then also in line with the youth programs was the dental and medical clinics. Those we did not fully fund to their request. So that would be another area we could take a look at, again, monitoring when that program is up and running.
What do you look at a dollar amount?
Give me 1 minute.
The city manager asked for this, I want to make sure she gets it, so at least some idea here.
Let's see here. Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, for the additional service request, we are about $130,000 short of being able to fund all of that. And then on the PPE portion, there's about $72,000 that we're short in being able to fund everything that was requested.
So in my mind, Mayor, that's a good baseline, at least to start from now, to look at those two programs, put them back in, and make sure everyone gets funded the best they could. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, seeing a lot of heads nodding up here for that. Very good. Councilmember Rowe, any comments or additions?
It was a good presentation. I think the reserve is significant, and I think it'll be, it may be very necessary here in the next 18 months. We're not sure. So.
Councilmember Wong.
Mayor, thank you. First, I want to thank our staff and city manager for coming up with this in a pretty short time and try to follow all the guidelines and everything. I do have two concerns. The first one would be the business hiring and retention program. If we have sufficient funds for all those requests, that would be wonderful. But how if we do not have it? And what kind of criteria we are going to select those applications? This could be one issue. So, Micah, are you going to
Micah's
answer?
coming back
or?
up.
Okay, thank you.
Through the mayor, council member, that is a very good question. And so what we're proposing at the high level is open up through that first tranche of most impacted businesses, taking the feedback we receive from council around gyms and entertainment and add those into it. We would go into the second round should funding be available for the next most impacted industries and then so forth. So we would market for 2 weeks, open the program application up for 2 weeks, close it, fill out those grants, and then go to the next tranche. You're right, not every business will be eligible. We're trying to really target the small businesses in Chandler most impacted based on existing job losses. So there is a chance that not every business in Chandler will receive funding, and that's something we're cognizant of. However, given the funds we have available, we think we've put forward a proposal that'll really get at benefiting those businesses that we know have seen a lot of distress.
Thank you for your answer. So that's something that we need to pay attention. We don't want somebody come to the city saying, hey, it's so unfair or those things. If we can think that ahead, then we can prevent it. That. The second question I have is about, I think I already asked already about the program administrators. Well, that's a lot of money to distribute. And that the fairness would be very important. How could we make sure that money has been distributed in a very fair situation? Of course, we do want to trust the people we selected, but we do also need to have some kind of supervision mechanic behind.
Through the mayor, council member, it's a very astute observation. What we're looking at doing as part of the contract, and they'll be negotiated through that contract, is the annual reporting. Not annual, I mean weekly reporting to make sure the funds are going where they should be. So we do anticipate that there will be, metrics and auditing language added to the contract that, have the ability to go back and look at, okay, did these funds go?
Another situation is we probably also need to have the ability to respond immediately if somebody are going to complain, or in a timely fashion. Yeah.
Through the mayor, council member, that's what we would work with the grant administrator on. That would be their role and responsibility, is managing that conversation with the applicants. So that would be part of their roles, is getting back with them, answering questions, explaining why or why not in certain situations.
Thank you very much. And may I have one more comment? Yeah. That's not about viewers. Thank you. Yeah. Again, I already mentioned it in your previous, I'm sorry, I forget your name, I'm sorry.
Sandeep.
Sandy, yeah. in your presentation, I mentioned about the ability to do teleconferencing. I really hope that we can make this some kind of priority, that for this council or for next council, they would be feel if they need to go to other country or other state, they can do it in a much better quality, and it doesn't really need to be face on face, but the sound quality and the all those requirements. Yeah.
The Mayor, thank you. We will definitely look at that much more closely.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Yes, so to be quick, I think this is a very good plan, covers everything that I think we wanted and addressed in our previous meetings, how to quickly get to businesses and fund them, how to help our nonprofits and those, again, most vulnerable, and then also dealing a little bit with our backbone and security and making sure that we're gonna have that flexibility and mobility for our staff to be able to work from home, along with throwing in some safety protections with PPE for our own business, our internal staff. So I think it covers all of that, and I do also am very happy to see the 33% contingency, because that does provide us flexibility. I'm assuming, as with most of these programs, we're taking a quarterly look, see where the spends are, see what is being taken advantage of and what is not. We can pivot and to see what has been fully utilized that we may be able to want to throw more funds at. So I like all that being thrown in there. Thank you.
Councilmember McClements.
Almost ditto exactly what Vice Mayor said. I'll just reiterate, though, thank you for putting together a program, listening to what we're hearing from the community. It's going to make a big dent to those that are vulnerable in the business community at large. The only curiosity is, it's just from a round numbers perspective, is there a reason why we stopped at 9.5 million and not made it 10? That's all I have to say.
We'll treat that as rhetorical. Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor. So, this is a gift from the federal government to be able to use in our community. And this is both an economic and a human crisis. And I want to commend our staff for diligently reaching out to the community and communicating and getting feedback to make the decisions that you've made. I will go on record. I don't think that we should be using much for reserve. I think we should be pouring it into the marketplace, that what it was intended to be used for. We can keep a little bit back, but I would like to see those numbers, especially for the economic and for the social programs, increased. So I'd like to see our staff come back with some better numbers. And then if we have the ability where the city manager needs to make that call quickly, we can do that. Because I have a suspicion that the funding that's going to be used in Micah's department is going to be soaked up very quick. And I don't want to have to come back here, have a big long meeting, go over all the things we just went over. I want them to be able to turn the lights on and help our business community fast. So I'll just leave it with that. But overall, this is great. And again, Chandler leads in coming up with innovative ways to get this out into the marketplace. And I think our community is going to be better for it. Thank you.
And Councilmember Stewart, one of the items that we'll be looking at, item number 3, I believe, on the agenda, is to give the city manager the ability to make the decisions that we've made. And if there's additional funding necessary as it comes from Micah or from others, she could meet with us and not wait for an official council meeting. And so to enact the plan that we've put in place, I think the goal would be to empower her to pull the trigger on what we've detailed out. So that's why I feel confident to be able to match those future goals as presented. So, all right. Well, council, why don't we take a 5-minute break? To our audience here and online, we'll be convening our city council meeting at 6:13, 5 minutes.